everybody, my name's Gale, and I've tried to make this video 3 times. Third time's the charm, right? This is my book review for the book We Hunt the Flame, a book that I told you I was going to read after my last book review, and I did read about 2 or so weeks ago. So I'm going to tell you my review based off of what I remember from it and what I took from it. Yeah. There's going to be a spoiler section at around this number of minutes and seconds. So, if you are looking to read this book or are anyway interested after I do my non-spoiler section, feel free to click away before this time period, and those who are looking for a more in-depth review, when this time period comes up, that'll be the spoiler section. So, with that, let's begin. So, what are my first impressions? First, what is my overall feelings about this book? I don't like it. I really, really don't. And I feel really bad about that, because it feels like a book that's really trying hard to be good. It just has a lot of pitfalls that, for me, make it pretty hard to read. The first is that it takes its time. It really takes its time and is kind of obnoxious about how it takes its time. The main plot that it gives you in the front cover, the thing that, you know, you read and you're like, oh, that's the story I'm getting into, right? Has to do with this girl, the huntress, that's on the cover, Zafira, and then this guy, Nazir, who's an assassin, somehow meeting together to go find a magical MacGuffin. It's got a name, but it doesn't matter. So they have to go find this magical MacGuffin to save the world. But it takes them 160 pages just to get started on the journey to find the magical whatever it is. Like, that's how much you have to read through in order to get to what the cover sells you on. And it's not like this is action-packed, full of like, oh my gosh, things are happening all the time. It's a lot of talking. It's a lot of talking and a lot of, if I do this, then this happens. If this happens, then this is sad. And it's not fun, really. You kind of, like, at first it's fine, because you're like, oh, I'm getting into the story, world building, yay. But it just starts to drag by the 17th or so chapter, which also is another critique I have. The chapters are insanely short in this, which, exacerbates the problem of it feeling like it is way too slow. You get to, I want to give you an example. So here's chapter 7. Chapter 7 is 70 pages in this book, which is not the worst. But you have chapter 7 on page 70, and then chapter 8 is at page 76. So you go through 5 pages with this one character, and then you're in the next chapter. And I guess maybe that wouldn't be so bad if the reasons they separated the chapters made sense. Like I said, it feels really slow, but part of that is that this book tells the story in 2 perspectives, Zafira the huntress and Nazir the assassin. And that's cool. I actually do like getting both of their perspectives on the story, but they keep switching each chapter. So chapter 1 will be Zafira, and then chapter 2 will be Nazir, and then it'll be back and forth, back and forth. And it's because of these short chapters that then go back and forth in different story perspectives at different time period, like, not time periods in like one's in the future or anything, but like one person could be, they're at night at a club, and then the other person is in the daytime in the forest, and then you go back and the other person is now in the daytime at a castle, and it's really discombobulating. But then sometimes they'll do this weird thing where they're like, okay, Zephyra's talking to this guy, ends the conversation-ish on like a not quite a cliffhanger, but on like some information. And then it'll switch to Nazir. Nazir will go do his thing, and then it'll come back to Zephyra, and she'll still be in that conversation. And you'll be really confused, because when a chapter ends, a reader, like, in their mind, separates that scene. That scene is done to them. That conversation, whatever action was going on, unless it leaves on a cliffhanger like, and the knife was going for her throat, we, as readers, tend to block off the chapters. That's why there are chapters there, to kind of compartmentalize the action in the story. So when you have the action, and then you go somewhere else, and we've moved away from what that situation was, and we've gotten into another situation, and then you come back, and it is directly after that previous scenario we have already left, with like absolutely no reason why it should have been stopped, right? Like there wasn't a cliffhanger or anything. It was just, I said, yeah, my uncle's a blacksmith. Cue someone else, go party in a club, you know, oh, we're having secret rendezvous time, and then come back to me, and now I'm, yeah, he makes great iron weapons, really good at iron smithing. Like, that's so confusing to me. I don't know why that choice was made, and it makes it even more of a slog, because then you're reversing your brain and being like, okay, wait, I guess this wasn't the end of that scene. I've got to think about it again. Another thing that makes this really long to read is that the action, it's hard to describe. It's not done like action. Whenever any fight happens, or anything that would involve a heightening of adrenaline, the way that the action was written did not make me feel like action was being done. It seemed so passive in a way. And I don't necessarily mean like written in passive voice, like a grammar thing. I just meant like the feelings were that the characters understood they were in danger, but everything was just kind of happening without much driving force behind it. It's really hard to explain, but I'll give it kind of an example in the spoiler section. But just know that for me, it feels like whenever they were trying to amp up the action and get it going and be interesting, it really felt like it was the same. It felt like it was the same writing as when they're just talking, and that was weird. The last thing I'll say about it, actually is really two things. One, the characters themselves had interesting moments, but only two of them were really built up well. I guess maybe three, maybe a third character was kind of built up well. And I'll talk more about them because there are leads, Zephyra and Nazir, so obviously I will talk more about them in the spoiler section. But other than that, a lot of characters just felt boring and one note, and I really could not get myself to really care about anyone in this story. I think I felt a little bit of emotion for Nazir somewhat, because his story is just so goddamn depressing, but other than that, it really was hard for me to find any sort of connection with these characters that would make me feel like I cared about where they were going in this story and what happened to them. So that made it really sad and long too, because it's really hard to read a story about people you don't care about. But there is a good thing about this book. I swear, I don't hate it as much as I sound like I hate it. It just had a lot of problems. But it did have a very good point. And I want to share this here in the non-spoiler section because I feel like it does deserve acknowledgement. and that is the world building. This book is set in a Middle East, Arabian themed kind of fantasy world, which is rare. Most fantasies are European in nature. That's just how they are. Probably because there's a lot of European fantasy writers. And they're fun. I love a good medieval fantasy. But, you know, you don't get a lot of fantasies that take place in deserts and have all these, you know, Middle Eastern traditions, you know, kind of thrown in with their clothing, their food, how the desert works and how people live in a place that is not a forest that has maybe a swamp, and that's about as, you know, difficult as the land gets. So it's very interesting. The world is very cool to read about, and that was probably the thing that I was most excited about and that I liked most about this book, was that the author, this is her first book, and so I want to give her the benefit of the doubt and say that while she was trying to do a good story, it fell flat for me, but the world she was building was pretty fantastical, and I loved it very much. If I could fix a couple of the things that made this story so slow and hard to get through, I would absolutely love to read another story in this world, because the world was not the problem. It wasn't a problem at all. I very much liked where it took place, and the people in the sense that, like, how people reacted to each other and what was going on in the world that needed to be saved, you know? That kind of stuff was really interesting, and I really liked that. So, overall, unfortunately, despite that, I have to give We Hunt the Flame 2 out of 5 stars. I really want to like it. It is not a garbage book. It is not something that I am angry that I spent time reading, and nothing about it makes me very angry. It's just so hard to get into and so long. It just, a lot of baffling writing decisions for me. So I think that's it. That's really what I need to say for the non-spoiler section. If you want to read this book, go ahead. I'm not going to say it's a bad book to read. It was slow, but I certainly wouldn't recommend this to most people who are looking for just a good time. Not that kind of book. Thank you for watching the non-spoiler section. If you are not interested in the spoiler review, goodbye. Thank you for hanging out with me. If you want to see the spoiler review, I will put a brief intermission and then we'll get started. Woo! Alright, hello, welcome to the spoiler section of the video where I can talk more freely about why this book just doesn't do it for me. You ever just hate a character? Like, really just want their existence to not exist? I do, frequently. Lots of characters. I'm very picky. I'm very, very picky about what I like in characters. And what I hate most, probably, as a generic character archetype, is the best friend who's totally not the love interest, but because they're really close to the main character, they inevitably make a love triangle that goes nowhere and it's stupid and it relies on, but this person has been with me all along and they're good friends with me, so shouldn't I love them? Which is stupid. I hate that idea. And this book delightfully has one of those characters. His name's Dean. He's best friend. He's the brother of Zafira's best friend. And, yeah, he serves really no purpose in the story other than to be the guy who she should be in love with, but she just isn't. And I hate that. I really do. I think that's the stupidest thing a story could ever try to put in. Because we all know what's gonna happen. We all know something happens to that character. Either they fall in love with other side character and they're like, oh yay, I wasn't in love with main character all along or something. Or something bad happens to them, or they turn out to be bad. It never ends up with them being the person that gets, together with them. Point is, Dean is in here, and he actually attempts to go on this quest, but he's so unnecessary that he's in here for the first 160 pages, gets to the main quest, and then dies. He gets shot, and he dies before they really get anywhere on this quest. Like, that's how important he was, and I hate that a story puts that in, because it really, a good chunk of the slog at the front is this stupid side romance that you know is not gonna happen. You know it, you read it, you go, that's not... Clearly she's gonna end up with the assassin guy by the end. So why are you wasting 160 pages trying to hammer in that this friend is really who's, like, in love with her? And then he dies! It's not even he actually does anything in the end. He's just dead. The whole romance in this story was really stupid. I like a good slow burn romance, but this was like nothing, because the first 160 pages, the main characters don't meet each other, okay? Zafira and Nazir don't meet each other until they get to that second act. And then once they're there, they're mortal enemies, right? Because Dean gets killed by Nazir's friend Alistair, and she's like, oh, one of you two killed Dean. I'm your enemy now. And they're like, yeah, because we're here to kill you ultimately after we find the MacGuffin. They're not on good terms. And yet, there has to be a romance by the end of it, or like some semblance of romance by the end of it. So they just keep going, and then random things will happen where, like, it'll be like, oh, she fights well. I find that attractive. Like, that's the bulk of the romance. It's just random, oh, he's dark and brooding. I find that attractive. Which is not a basis for a good romance. Like, they don't really talk to each other about anything. It's very much a lot of, oh, they're different than most people. That makes them attractive to me. Also, darkness. Because both of them are tied to the darkness and really kind of like the way you think of stereotypical emo kids, like, I wasn't born in the darkness, but I've been in the darkness all my life, and therefore it is a part of me. Which is cringy to say and cringy to read. Nasir is an assassin by trade, forcibly. Like, it's not his, like, what he wanted to be. His mom and dad made him that way. But, like, he has a little bit more wiggle room with that because, assassin's darkness, it kind of goes together. But yeah, a lot of it is just emo. I was always in the dark, so now I am the dark. And the dark is my friend, but the darkness is me. And it's the bad part of me, but also the good part of me. It's really cringy, but kind of funny when you, like, take a step back and think about it. So yeah, the romance doesn't do anything for me. It's really boring and kind of cliche in a lot of ways. I promised to talk about more about the action. I think one of the greatest, like, examples of why the action did not work for me is there is a battle with a sea monster. And that sounds so cool. Like, you're in a desert, you finally get to this, like, lake thing in the center of the series of countries, and there's a sea monster on your way to get, to the island that has MacGuffin. It should be so cool! And I don't know if it's just because it's a mythological creature that I'm not aware of that has a specific way of defeating it, or if it was just made up for this world. But they battle it for maybe 2 pages, and by battle, I mean Nazir is able to get out a knife and like try to stab it once. And then he's freaking out because it didn't really work, right? Oh my gosh, this monster's really strong. We're gonna have to do this epic battle thing. And then his friend Alistair just stands at the edge of the boat and starts singing. And that's it. That's the monster's weakness. It doesn't like singing. He's singing this weird shanty. It's not even like a beautiful melody with like impactful lyrics. It's just like a shanty. He sings it and the monster goes away. And that's the scene. That's the action scene with the sea monster. It never shows up again. That's it. And that's where I'm like, why? What kind of, how can it be cool to read about a sea monster fight, but the answer was singing, and we didn't know the answer. We had no way, the audience had no way of knowing, unless of course that's some sort of mythical creature I don't know about. But otherwise, on an audience who is reading this book and has no prior knowledge of any sort of weird mythical creatures that might have death by singing as a part of their skill set, you have no way of knowing that this creature dies by singing. They've never been mentioned before at all. Singing has never been a weapon before at all. But it happens now, so the battle with the sea monster takes 3 pages again, and then we're on to the next thing. In every battle really kind of feels like that. It feels like they go into it, but then they just do stuff and it works. And there's no real like motion to the words. They're not like, oh, she extended her arm and twisted the knife in between its ribs. That kind of visual like movement and descriptor of action just doesn't exist in this book. It's like she stabbed, she looked over, she kicked, and it's so not, like I said before, it feels so passive. It feels like you're reading about watching a movie about an action scene. I guess the final thing, I don't want to take too long. This book, again, I don't hate it. I sound like I hate it. I don't hate it. I just really didn't like it. But the last thing I'll talk about is something that I think is actually important for anyone who is looking to write a story at all. Because I think it's something that this book tried to do, and you can see what it's trying to do, but there's a reason it doesn't work, and I want people to understand that reason. At least from my point of view, why it doesn't work. And that is secrets. A lot of fantasy worlds and a lot of books will have some sort of big secret, a climactic secret that changes a character's perception of something or of someone, or changes how the world's in danger in some way. It's a crux of most good stories, is at some point the hero realizes something isn't what they originally thought, and that changes how they move on in the future. This book has a lot of those. More than really they should have. And none of them really work how I think the story intended it. One of the easiest ones, the first one that comes up, is that there's this lion guy. He's an ancient wizard, basically, for lack of a huge backstory that you could read if you wanted to. But he's basically a wizard, an evil half-demon wizard who got angry in the past, like a century ago, and then took down the ruling elite magic class, and that's why magic's gone from this world, right? He's a mythological character who happens to be evil. And he shows up in the first half as this mythological fable, and he's the only evil other than the Sultan, okay? Nazir's father, that's ever talked about, okay? Then they get to the island where they're searching for the MacGuffin, and they're all together, and they're like, what's going on? Why is all this bad stuff happening to our world? The the forest that's eating things up, the fact that nobody could reach this lake for like a century to get to this island. What's with all the bad magic going around? And then a new character who really doesn't matter, comes in and he tells everybody, he's like, oh yeah, we're gonna go find this MacGuffin, and they're all like, okay, now this is an ensemble book. Sure, more characters, whatever. And he sits him down and he's like, okay, well, first secret. Turns out the bad guy is the bad guy. The evil magic comes from evil magic dude. You're facing evil magic dude. The lion dude's still here. Everybody's like, what? But as a reader, you're like, well, of course it was evil magic lion dude. Because we've heard no other person who has evil magic in this story. Even the Sultan who's evil does not have magic and does not want this. Like, he sent his son to get the MacGuffin because he seemingly doesn't want this foresty thing to eat up his country either. So you know it's not him. So the only other evil person is this lion guy. So you're like, okay, I guess that's a secret for the characters, but it's not really a secret for us. Because we have brains. We could figure it out. But then there's other secrets that are just like, so they're secrets for us too, but then they don't matter. Like Alistair. Been traveling around with Nasir this entire time, and then he's like, oh, at the end, actually, I'm your brother. Half-brother. We have the same mom, Nasir. And it's just like, you already were acting like brothers, right? So, what does this change? Sure, I guess he doesn't even have, claim to the throne because the Sultan's not his dad. But, the mom was the Sultana, and I guess she was the one in power. I don't know how that works. Either way, it doesn't sound like he's, going for the throne or anything. He's just, I'm your brother now. And it does nothing to the story. It's useless information. It doesn't change the relationship between them. It doesn't change where their actions go. It's just, okay, it was a secret. Sure. The fact that Nasir figures out who his brother and mom's true identities are, and that both of them are alive, instead of, his mom being dead like he thought she was, it didn't really change anything. And probably because this is a first book in a two-parter, I'm not going to read the second part. I don't care about any of these characters. I don't care about any of these secrets. None of these went anywhere. Which is why, here's my point. For anyone who is thinking about writing and they have their own big secret that needs to get out, make sure the secret gets out, one, in an impactful moment. Do not have them sit by a fire and then suddenly, oh hey, also, I'm your long-lost, dead twin cousin mom thing. Because it just, why? At that moment, it means nothing to anybody. It's just a thing that you're saying. And sure, it could be true, and the characters can react and be all angry at it, but it doesn't mean anything. And it doesn't mean anything to your audience at that point. They're like, whoa, but then it's gone. The rest of the story continues on, and they have no reason to really go back into the beginning of the story and be looking for hints that that was true all along, right? Which really is the crux of a good, secret, is can you go back to the beginning of the story and look through with a new lens and see it in a different perspective, understand things that you didn't understand before. If you can accomplish that, your secret's good. But if you're just saying it for shock value, to be like, oh, this character wasn't who you thought they were all along, but it also doesn't change anything, that's not good use of that time. That character does not need to be someone special if that doesn't change anything, or that doesn't mean anything at that moment. That's my reading lesson for you for this video. Don't make secrets stupid. Don't make them easy, and don't make them mean nothing. If it's important enough to hold from your audience, it should have some sort of bearing on the story. And that's it. I've talked for an awful long time, and I think I've got out most of my emotions and how I feel about this book. I will not be reading it again, and I will not be reading the sequel, so don't bother asking for it. Not that you would. I don't think anyone would, but I'm not. It just didn't hold my attention enough. So what am I reading next time? Actually, I'm reading a book recommended by one of you guys, my lovely commenters. Someone recommended The Never-Ending Story, and I've actually never watched the movie or read this book or have any synopsis or anything. I only know about a sad horse. That's the only thing I know about this story, is there's a sad horse. So, I'm gonna read this, and then I'll come back to you with another book review about what I feel about this book. If you would like to read with me, go ahead. And that's it for this episode. Leave your comments down below if you've read We Hunt the Flame, or if you've read Never-Ending Story. No spoilers, don't spoil it for me. But, yeah, I'm looking forward to reading this, and I'm looking forward to hearing your guys' thoughts on any of the books I talked about today. So, I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye!
Hi there, it's the end of the video, my friend. Hit the bell if it was okay, I'm sure I'll make good content someday. I'll play some games or do some drawing, Pokemon and fights with darling, video essays and reviews. I couldn't do it without you, so thanks, like and subscribe.